Jennifer Pomerantz, CEO of American Natural. Jennifer, can you tell us a little bit about the grand opening of your first natural gas station in Pittsburgh and what led American Natural to do this?
Thank you, Rick. We're thrilled to be opening the region's first energy center here at Station Square. We have CNG, gasoline, and diesel that we'll be offering here at Station Square. We decided to do this in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is the center of really the transportation and the commodity markets for many years. And with the boom in natural gas that is occurring here, the population is becoming more and more educated as to the product offering in the market. We have a phenomenal fleet that is going to be with us, Veterans Taxi, will be fueling up at our station. And our organization here, substantially all of our employees are actually from the greater Pittsburgh area.
Is there any plans for additional stations from American Natural?
Sure. So our energy centers are the brand that we are developing, and we are going to be announcing to the media shortly our plans for future stations and future development. But as I say to many people, this is the beginning.
Well, this is great, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Today with Barbara Brentano of GNA, Jennifer Pomerantz of American Natural. Barbara, can you tell us a little bit about the Honda Civic?
This is the only sedan made in America that is factory built to run on CNG. The engine has been certified by the EPA as the cleanest internal combustion engine on the planet, and it's Honda.
And Jennifer, where do you see vehicles, light-duty vehicles like the Honda, the MV1, and some of the other OEM manufacturers playing into the use of CNG at your stations?
Thank you. So, first of all, we're thrilled to have a Honda, Ford and GM all in the process of developing increasing amounts of passenger vehicles. As what many people talk about is the chicken and egg issue, and we're thrilled to be able to supply the infrastructure here in such a high traffic location like Station Square, so that the residents of downtown and the community of the South Side can actually think about a passenger vehicle, a Honda as an example, as a choice for them, as they certainly look at the sign at a very low price relative to gasoline. They can save a lot of money by using CNG, and it's accessible. We're open access, so we're thrilled.
I come here today to talk to you about our nation, and Rock can talk to you about the importance of natural CNG and American Natural to Pittsburgh. But as a military officer, I wanted to talk to you about my 30 years experience in the military and how for the last 20 years I've studied national security. I want to talk to you about why the facility we opened today makes us safer as a nation. I also understand that I'm the last speaker and that I'm standing between you and the reception, so I'll try to make it short. The first thing we need to understand is that as Americans, we have an overdependence on oil. 3 years ago, I was privileged to lead a group of 11 recently retired admirals and generals. And for a year, we studied the use of oil in the United States, where we got our oil, how we used it, and what would happen if we didn't have enough. The report we developed was presented to the U.S. Senate chambers in Washington and thought leaders around the nations. And the principal finding was strident. We found that America's dependence on oil constituted a significant risk to our national security. So let's spend a few minutes and look at why. Fact number one. America uses 19 million barrels of liquid fuel each and every day. That's a combination of refined oil, corn ethanol, biodiesel, and other liquid fuels. Fact two. Of that 19 million barrels we use every day, 75% goes to the transportation sector. Another way to say it is that 3/4 of all the oil that we use every day goes to power our cars, trucks, planes, ships, and other vehicles. But the most significant fact is that today, 95% of transportation requires liquid fuels. So it's fair to say that the transportation system is totally dependent on oil. And why is that? Because we simply don't have alternatives. So let's look at this transportation oil dependence from a national security perspective. Imagine for a moment what might happen if some rogue nation cut off our oil supply for maybe a few days or a few weeks. Remember, 75% of all transportation requires, 95% of all transportation requires liquid fuels. So without liquid fuels, the food doesn't make it to markets. Most of you can't go to work or to school. There are no emergency services, no fire trucks, no police cars, no ambulances. And within days, industries and businesses who have come to rely on just-in-time logistics shut down. And just as importantly, the majority of our military forces can no longer deploy. Without oil, our economy comes to a screeching halt. The nation would cease to exist as we know it. So make no mistake, the complete cutoff of oil is an existential threat to our nation. You see, oil is the Achilles heel of the great and powerful United States of America. We know it, and so do our adversaries. So the good news is that we produce a great deal of our oil right here in the United States. And much of what we import is from either Canada or Mexico. So in the Northern Hemisphere, we have the ability to protect our oil supplies. But of the 9 billion barrels of oil that we import each and every day, more than half of it comes from overseas. And as a result, we have military deployed all around the world to protect those fragile oil supply lines. And they protect it in harm's way. Nonetheless, the oil that we do import primarily comes from OPEC-controlled sources. And as many of you know, OPEC is an oligopoly of nations, which include Venezuela, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Nigeria. Many of these OPEC countries don't share our values, and some would like to see us harmed. Yet they are the very nations that control the oil supply and the price around the world. So what if next week, say, OPEC didn't like our policy in Syria or Egypt, and they decided to embargo oil as they did back in 1973 without any warning? Ask yourself this question. How long could you live on only half the trips you make in your car? Would you still have a job after 90 days? Could you live with half of the food in the markets that we currently have? I contend it would not be a pretty sight. So the point is that we live on the knife edge of energy. And we require that we import oil from nations who do not like our policies. And that makes us extremely vulnerable. So how do we extract ourselves from this predicament without going back to the Stone Age? Well, many across the nation would say, yeah, it's simple, just drill for more oil. Drill, baby, drill, or frack, baby, frack. Probably heard that. But I would argue that's only a temporary situation. First of all, most of the easily accessible oil has already been tapped. It's just not there the way it was before. They're exhausted. So some would look to the recent boom in shale oil and light tight oil. That could be a solution to our problem. To them I say yes, shale oil and light tight oil are part of the solution, but look at it frankly, we've been at this for 5 years hard now, and we've barely produced more than 1 million barrels per day more net oil. It just simply isn't making up for the amount of oil that we are depleting from our traditional sources. Don't get me wrong, the new oil is helpful, but it's not the solution. The most optimistic estimates of the amount that shale oil and light tight oil can provide are 6 to 10 million barrels per day. That's still far short of the 18 to 20 we use. So if you take our light tide oil at 6 to 10 and you add all the oil we can import from Canada and Mexico, we might have enough in the Northern Hemisphere to meet our needs. And so you'll hear about, hey, Northern America can achieve oil independence, which is different than energy independence. But if you take a look at it from a national security perspective, the last time I looked, both Canada and Mexico were sovereign nations. And the oil companies of those companies can and do sell their oil to the highest bidder. And that's not necessarily the United States. And that brings us to price. Price is the second Achilles heel of oil. You see, oil is a globally traded commodity. Its price is set by global demand for oil and available supply. Don't forget, who's the largest supplier? OPEC. They set the price globally. Make no mistake. And it's this global pricing is the reason that even though we're producing more today than we did in 1990, if you look at the price, we're paying 3 times as much as we did in 1990 than we are today. It's because of OPEC and the global price on oil. And make no mistake, the elevated price of oil hurts our economy. It stifles growth and investment, and it hurts every family in their pocketbooks. For the military, the more we pay for oil, the less we can invest in capability and capacity. High oil prices hurt the military, they hurt our economy, and it hurts our national security. So what's the source of this big global demand, and will it go away anytime soon? Well, let me give you a couple examples. 3 years ago, China surpassed the United States as the largest car market in the world. And they're growing at 12% a year. Last year, China surpassed the United States as the largest oil importer in the world. And their overall energy demand is growing at 7% a year. You can see similar growth trends in Indonesia and in India. So if you believe that oil is a globally traded commodity and worldwide demand is increasing at 3 to 5% per year, you can see that it's unlikely that the price of oil is going to go down anytime soon. You getting concerned yet? So what can we do to reduce our oil habit and improve our national security? Well, I offer 2 simple solutions. The first and easiest method is to reduce the oil we use through efficiency. Over the last 5 years, we have seen a nearly 10% drop in our liquid fuel consumptions as cars and trucks become more efficient and people change their habits. And yeah, one could argue that, hey, that's because the prices are so high, but it doesn't matter. Regardless of the cause, we have proven that it can be done. And I would contend that there's a great deal more to be done in both efficiency and in reducing the amount of trips that we take and in the cost per trip. But the second, and really the most critical way to reduce our strategic vulnerability to oil is the reason that brings us all here today. To reduce our dependence on oil and improve our national security, we must increase our resilience by providing options other than oil. We must diversify our transportation fuel sources. In the year-long study that I mentioned earlier, we found through analytical analysis that it only takes a 30% reduction in oil demand to significantly reduce our national vulnerability. And as we've seen over the last 5 years, we can achieve some of that through efficiency. But fuel diversification is a must if we're going to really break the chokehold on oil. So in this year-long study that I mentioned about oil and national security, we examined 9 different alternatives to fuel in the transportation sector. Some were risky because they required critical elements that we don't control, such as lithium or rare earth elements. Others had risk because they raised the food price or affected the food supply. Others were not yet technically feasible, and some, the amount of energy you needed to convert from one form of fuel to another was just too expensive. But the single most promising near-term solution we found was compressed natural gas. We found natural gas in the United States to be abundant, inexpensive, and to have lower emissions and pollutants as compared to petroleum. But the biggest obstacle that was identified was the lack of infrastructure to get gas into the tanks of our cars and trucks. It was because of this lack of infrastructure that consumers were afraid to purchase these vehicles because they wanted to be able to fill them up. There was no gas stations around. We also found that without a consumer base, companies and investors were less likely to invest in the filling stations and the infrastructure necessary because there wasn't a base. It was a chicken and egg conundrum. We call it in the military, chicken and egg. But today, we begin to solve that conundrum and take a large step into improving our national security. Today, we open a facility that provides the needed infrastructure for CNG, and Pittsburgh and Allegheny County become leaders in the energy revolution. Following the lead of Pittsburgh, I see a world where in the not too distant future, CNG stations will be available across the nation, taking advantage of the natural gas fields that span this great country. Consumers will have choice, and it will drive down costs. Truckers, taxis, and other high mileage vehicles will be drawn to lower costs because of the per mile investment, and smart choices by our consumer will drastically reduce our overdependence on oil and improve our national security. And so I applaud companies such as American Natural and Veterans Taxis and others who have the vision to realize the great potential of this energy source. It's through your investment and your risk-taking that you are lowering our dependence on oil and making us less vulnerable to being held hostage to bad oil cartels. I salute you. And on behalf of all of our troops around the globe, away from their family and in harm's way, out there protecting those oil supply lines, I thank you for relieving some of their burden and for making use of our own American energy resources to make us a safer nation. So to American Natural, to Allegheny County, and to Pittsburgh, I salute you all, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Captain, Corporal, and all of you in the military who are here. We salute you. Thank you again for coming. I want to thank the rest of you for your time and just say a couple last comments in response to the Captain's speech. Thanks to what many of you know as the Marcellus Shale, and certainly shales beyond the Marcellus, the United States has a 100-year supply of natural gas. If we converted 176 billion gallons, which is our current consumption per year, we actually would have enough natural gas to fuel our entire vehicle fleet for 50 years. That is a lot more than I can say for OPEC, which is approximately 30% of global supply, and you are reinvesting right here in the local economy. In 2008, $500 billion went overseas, which there's several different research institutes that calculated that as 4.5% of our GDP was lost to high oil prices. We now have a choice. Again, we are one of an industry that's growing, and I would just say to all of you that all of you being here matters. All of you being here shows that you care about fuel choice, and you care about better options for our future.